take us back to October. At what point in October did you realize something was off with Caroline?
It was probably she went to the hospital the 21st, so it was probably the 18th or 19th that she started having a cough. And then that by that Friday, which was the 21st, she just plummeted super quickly. My husband took her to the emergency room, and we were there for many, many hours before being transferred to University of Maryland Children's. So it was several days that she felt okay, and then once she felt bad, it was a really quick decline.
How scary was this for you being a new mom?
Pretty scary, especially knowing from the pediatrician, like there was nothing, that can treat RSV. So knowing that and, not having been through this before, was definitely a little nerve-wracking, but she did tell me some things to look for, and ultimately that really, clued us into how badly she was doing on Friday, with her breathing. So, I was appreciative of that information. But it was
Mhm.
hard knowing that we couldn't do anything.
So just how badly was she doing?
When she was brought into the emergency room by my husband, I don't recall her. I wasn't there, but I don't recall her, so I don't recall her what her oxygen levels were at the time. But he did tell me that when they put the pulse oximeter on her, they thought it was broken. They went through three of them before they realized this was actually her oxygen level, and we needed to get her back right away. So they had her on oxygen, a nasal cannula pretty quickly after getting there.
I guess what I really want to get to, because all of this, you're so composed. And me just when I read the story that Stephanie sent over to us, I was just like, oh my gosh. So as someone who was living through all of this, walk us through some of your emotions of realizing that things were not progressing, but they were getting worse. What were you doing, feeling?
That when we were still in the first hospital that we went to, before University of Maryland, they had put her on at the time they put her on the ventilator. That's when I started to get really, really terrified. And then when the doctor told us that they would have to send her somewhere else. I had just been reading, I'm not even kidding, earlier that day, I was reading a news article about RSV and how hospitals were full. And I had texted my husband, like, I can't believe this is happening. Like, I hope this doesn't happen to us. And I just never expected that to happen. And when they told us that, this ventilator can't support her, we just don't have the means at this hospital. I knew we were in for a long road. And the doctor there, she was calling hospitals for hours, putting us on wait lists. And, being in the nation's capital, you'd think that you'd have access to these things, immediately. And it was horrifying to know, like, here I am at the hospital and they can't help her, and there's nowhere to go that can help her. Like that, just I couldn't understand. I couldn't wrap my head around the situation, really.
Yeah, yeah. It literally took hours for you guys to find a hospital bed.
Yeah, yeah, hours. And then we had to wait for a life flight team, which was a long time on top of that.
How
So
long was that wait?
I would say at least an hour. I know they had to come from Virginia, so it was a while. I mean, I think it was around maybe 8:30 that we were told we could go to Baltimore, and we didn't arrive in Baltimore till about 10:40. So
Mhm. One more question before I come to you, Doc. What was that moment like I don't know if you were able to go into the helicopter with
I
her.
did. I did.
Okay, what was that like? Just was it a bit surreal walking on the helipad, getting into the helicopter and seeing your baby hooked up?
It was definitely. I did not want to go on a helicopter. I'll put it that way. But knowing it was only a 10-minute flight, so that was really really nice. And I was so thankful that we were close to home. I knew that was really, really lucky. They were talking about, we might have to send you to Pittsburgh, we might have to send you to Roanoke, wherever comes up is where you're going. And to have somewhere 30 minutes from where we live was just a blessing. I mean, a serious blessing. And yeah, it was not what I wanted to do, but I knew we were going somewhere that could help her, and that gave me so much relief.
Thank God for that. Dr. Custer, walk me through how bad a shape Caroline was in.
I think the circumstances are exactly as Sarah talks about them. So we were in the midst of, that October 21st. That day was really an inflection point in the regional response for RSV. So we were in one of the worst viral surges of respiratory illness we have seen. And as you said, the news was starting to break that the hospitals were becoming inundated. And I remember getting the call. I was actually on call that night in the pediatric ICU. I remember getting the call. We had set up a centralized regional call center for patients who needed critical care. And we were triaging the sickest patients in the region, saying, as soon as a bed becomes available, let's move the next patient. And when I got this call, I quickly thought, this is the sickest patient in the region. And I looked at my nursing colleagues and said, we've got to get her in. So we just quickly mobilized, said, yep, we're ready to go. Mobilize the life flight team, get her picked up, and she got there somewhere in 10:30 or 11 o'clock that night. And I remember you all walking in and trying to make sure I was reassuring you, but knowing how sick she was and knowing how quickly she got sick, we worked on that whole night. And by the next day, she was improving. We were able to get the lines in we need and the monitors we need, and she was making progress, and her blood gases were getting better and her oxygen levels were stabilizing. And so I felt pretty good that next day that, okay, we're on the right track. This is a baby who, is healthy before this, and she's gonna have a good outcome and recover. And we had other patients in the unit with very similar stories who were, getting intubated at other hospitals, getting flown to us, needing high-level ICU care that we provide. And so the hope was, yep, she's on the mend. We're gonna make her better.
Doc, I'm wondering if you could kind of hone in on what you said about there being other patients who are being flown into you. It seems as if there was a moment where there was inundation of hospitals in the region. What were you seeing? What levels? How does it compare to previous levels of this virus that you've had to deal with?
So this virus got on us earlier and more severe than it usually does. We see RSV every year. Last year and the COVID years were actually very, very light RSV years. And what we think happens is that when the whole community doesn't see RSV in a year, the next year, there's a lot more RSV in the community. And so, Caroline actually had RSV and she had another viral, which is completely typical of kids her age. She's in daycare. They get 6 or 8 viruses a year. She had a combination of 2 viruses. And so, as you said, we were getting multiple calls a night saying, do you happen to have a bed? Do you happen to have a bed? And oftentimes it was no. It was there are no regional beds. As Sarah pointed out, it was maybe there are beds available in Pennsylvania or Northern Virginia. And luckily, and some kids were sent farther away from home. But that night we sort of said, this case, we need to get this case in. She needs help now. Needs help close. And that's what we did.
What was it about Caroline's case that made you realize that she needs it now and she needs that proximity?
Just how quickly it sounded like the story evolved. And so oftentimes with respiratory illness, kids get sick and need critical care, but it evolves a little more slowly. Her case was, as Sarah points out, when they got to the emergency department, she was recognized to be critically ill quickly and needing a breathing tube. And we knew that we needed to help them because they don't have pediatric critical care at many hospitals. There are really only 2 pediatric intensive care units in the state.
Mm-hmm. What would have happened if Caroline didn't get a bed with you guys?
I think the team there would have continued to stabilize her. I think that they were doing the best they could with the resources they had. And then you just keep opening up that geographic region to say, where's the bed? Where's the bed? Where's the bed? So the centralized call triage tool worked, I think, really well for many kids during this surge, and we got kids to the care they needed.
Do you find that things are slowing down a bit? I checked the dashboard online. It seems as if there's a peak and it's coming down. Do you anticipate that it will remain that way for the rest of the season?
We've certainly seen RSV come down over the last 3 weeks, but right on its heels is influenza. So the regular flu virus is certainly building. And then early signs point to COVID coming back online the next couple of weeks. So, I think we're going to be in the midst of a pretty long winter here. Making sure if you haven't gotten that flu shot, get that flu shot. If you haven't gotten that COVID booster, get that COVID booster. If you're eligible, and then wash your hands and stay home if you're sick. Those are the biggest things.
What other advice do you have for people? As you just mentioned, we are on the cusp of what could be a very long winter season. Even if we're not dealing with RSV, there's then COVID, and then there's the flu. So what should people be doing other than what you just said?
Those are the biggest things. I mean, I think we all need to, I think we've all become very aware of respiratory viral illnesses in the last couple of years, right? We didn't think about it as much as we currently do. And so now, as we're going into holidays and we might be around loved ones with, immunodeficiencies or elderly loved ones, we just got to just think a little bit more. Is this the right thing to do if I'm not feeling well? So I think that's just that thought process we have to have all the time now. I mean, it's just the right thing to do to keep those viruses at bay.
How is Caroline doing now, Dr. Custer?
Well, Sarah would know better than me, but we talked this morning when I reached out, and she said she's doing great. I mean, she spent time with us in the ICU. She got out of the ICU. She went to our general pediatric floor. She was able to go home, and it sounds like she's thriving, according to what Sarah told me this morning.
Okay. And was that release in a matter of days?
How long were you in the hospital? About 2.5 weeks?
It was 23 days.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know it down to the day.
I do.
Yeah, sure.
I do.
Yeah.
Sarah, one of my last questions for you. How grateful are you and your husband that this is where you are at this point?
I'm so grateful. There were a couple of moments throughout this process and during those 23 days that I was sure that she wasn't coming home. I mean, I really did feel that, and it was terrifying. So to be where we are now, where so far we aren't seeing any lasting effects from the ventilator so far. I mean, she's progressed to where she was, beyond where she was when she went in before she got sick. I mean, she's almost walking, she's talking more, she's just thrilled to be back with her friends at school, and she's doing so good, and it's really wonderful to see.
I just kind of want to make sure I'm understanding you. When you said you thought she wasn't going to come home, what exactly do you mean by that? Do you believe that she was going to pass away?
I did. There were a few moments, especially at the first hospital that we were at, when we were waiting for somewhere to go, and seeing the team, dozens of people working to keep her stabilized and oxygenate her. And in my head, I was like, I have to go home and pack up all her things. Like, what do I do with all of her stuff? Like, I have to go home without her. My mind was like already going there, and it was an out of body experience. I know people say that, but that's what it truly felt like.
Anything that you both would like to say about this experience and where you've come out on the other end?
Well, I told Sarah this morning, I just really appreciated their approach. I mean, they were present, they were advocates. I mean, they were really just fantastic parents. I'm always so amazed at how, as you said before, how composed people can be at what is essentially the worst moment of their lives. And I just thank you for putting the trust in our team. Caroline's story, I think, is even more amazing than the things she went through in the ICU. I mean, she was on really an artificial lung machine for a couple of days, and it has come through it amazingly. But I think part of that is through the presence of her parents being at the bedside, advocating for her, talking to her, reading to her, making sure that she knew they were there. That was a huge part of her recovery, and partnering with us to make sure we did all the right things at each step of the way. So I want to thank them for their presence. Fantastic.
Thank you.
Sarah.
And from the moment that I got there, I mean, Dr. Custer was waiting for me. I'll never forget, he had water for me, he had a chair for me, he was ready for me. And yeah, I mean, my husband and I, we pushed. We were there 24/7, and when we didn't, agree with something, us non-medical people didn't, like the way things were going, we pushed. And things, we worked, I really feel like we worked together, and I really appreciated the team, and especially all the nurses too. I mean, they were really by her side 24/7. And I'm so thankful that we ended up there. So thank you, Dr. Custer.
Absolutely. And I'll echo the team. I mean, it really is. I mean, this is the type of care you can only get at a specialized children's hospital. It's nursing, it's respiratory therapy, it's child life, it's social work, case management, all of our leadership, the ECMO team. I mean, it's so many. If you look at her chart, the amount of people that were touched by her and were able to touch her case are tremendous. And that's what we'll take away. She'll leave a lasting impact on us. I know that.
Yeah, that's all.